Andy, very good afternoon to you. I mean, first of all, it is incredible that it was a year ago since that horrific attack on Congress. We've had many investigations. I think there's a congressional investigation taking place at the moment. How much did that help, that attack, to undermine American democracy?
Well, it was described and continues to be described in the liberal establishment press as an insurrection. But if you look at the charges against the suspects, none of them have actually been charged with insurrection, which is a federal crime. And that should tell you what you need to know.
What was it then if it wasn't an insurrection?
It was a riot.
A riot.
Criminal activity.
Yep.
There are many falsehoods that... I mean, what happened that day was horrible and a disgrace to America. But it wasn't insurrection, and treating it, I think, as how the Democrat establishment call it, the darkest day in America. I think that's treating it as like a partisan political something to just sort of kick around. And you can see bits of that in the speech that the president just said. Many falsehoods continue to be repeated about it. The number of people who died, there were 5 people who died. The only homicide out of the 5 is that of Ashley Babbitt, who was shot as she was climbing through the window by an officer. The other 1 died of a drug overdose, and 3 others died of unrelated health issues. So a lot of the narrative around it did end up falling apart.
But fundamentally, the narrative that seems to have led to this awful day, as you would agree, seems to be President Trump's repeated attempts to claim that this election wasn't won, which, you know, as President Biden's pointed out, I mean, he is, after all, in the White House, have been proven time and time again to be wrong. And fundamentally, very few people, even within the Republican establishment, seem to think that President Trump actually won.
Yeah, well, certainly I don't. I'm not here to defend any allegations and claims that the 2020 election was stolen, but I think what the public needs to remember that who started this game was the Democrat establishment. Back in 2016, immediately after Trump had was announced to be the winner, the response wasn't just that the election was stolen because of a collusion with a foreign entity, Russia. I mean, there was evidence that was faked. I'm referring to the Steele dossier. That was funded in part by the Hillary Clinton campaign. And where I'm from, Portland, Oregon, thousands, more than 10,000 people responded to reject the election results by engaging in political violence and carried that out for 4 years. And that was excused. And in the 6 months leading up to the 6th of January last year, there were deadly political violence that was being carried out by people ostensibly on the left and far left, doing it in the name of Black Lives Matter and anti-racism and anti-fascism. So
you seem to be suggesting both sides are as bad as each other.
I don't think it really matters who's worse than who. What I'm just saying is that if the position is that political violence is wrong, that is a position that our political leadership needs to take, then you can't ignore the months of deadly unrest that was carried out in America.
But there is a difference here in the sense that, you know, when President Trump stood up and said we need to fight like hell and there needs to be a strong response in front of a crowd that then went on to storm the Capitol building in a riot, as the President of the United States, he has to take some form of responsibility for that. He's the leader of the country. But, I mean, more so than almost anyone else.
I agree. At the same time, I also believe that before the trial against Derek Chauvin had even started, there were Democratic politicians who described George Floyd's death as a murder when that evidence wasn't presented yet as a trial, and that incited violence as well. So
let's look at American democracy. You know, clearly there is real concern that we could see more stuff like we're seeing now on screen, that is of the attack on the Capitol building. How likely do you think that is?
I mean, it was an attack on democracy insofar that of the location, right? This is where Congress is. But when I look at what happened that day and just compare that, it was a riot and an attack on federal U.S. property. Where I'm from, in Portland, Oregon, for an entire month in July of 2020, every night there were thousands of people who were attempting to burn down U.S. federal property, U.S. federal courthouse. And that was excused by the local elected government, as well as many politicians at the national level who told Trump to remove the federal officers who were sent to protect that property. So a lot of this, to me, seems, again, just like a political football and a partisan game. And
in many regards, what I'm trying to get at is that, frankly, we talk an awful lot less on this side of the pond about American politics than we did when President Trump was in office. You're right in pointing out there was a hell of a lot of violence on lots of sides in lots of states in the United States over the last year. That seems to have dissipated somewhat since President Trump has left the White House. I suppose my question is, if he was to run again, would that genuinely aid American democracy, or does it potentially stoke up some of those divisions that we saw play out during his term of office?
Well, given that he's still refused to, his legacy, I think, is that of ignominy, in that he's continued to reject the legitimacy of the last election, and many Americans feel that way. I think if he was to re-enter politics again, that would be polarizing for America. At the same time, Democrats haven't done anything to unite the country, as they promised to do when Biden was running as a candidate.
And just very finally, many people outside the United States, but inside as well, feel that this plays into the hands of Moscow and Beijing, this great eternal division in the United States. Is that something that you share?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a divided America domestically is a weakened America. And you can see that, we're being attacked, culturally, socially, politically, and the whole world order is being shifting. And, a weakened American democracy means democracy is weakened, therefore, around the rest of the world.
Okay. Andy, appreciate your time. Andy, no.
My pleasure.
From Portland, Oregon, but here in the United Kingdom, joining us in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for your time.